Every year, over 4 million people enter Yosemite National Park. Some never come out. No cries for help, no trails to follow, no trace at all. These are the ones the wilderness took. These are Yosemite's missing. The year was 1981. The date, July 17th. And 14-year-old Stacy Ann Ross was on a horseback riding trip in Yosemite's High Sierra wilderness. After arriving at Sunrise High Sierra Camp, she asked her dad if she could take a walk to a ridge and take some photographs. An older man from the group went with her, but he stopped to rest halfway. Stacy continued alone. Minutes later, she was gone. The search that followed was massive, including dogs, helicopters, massive numbers of search personnel, but all they ever found was her lens cap from her camera. Her body, her camera itself, her clothes, none of that was ever recovered. The National Park Service still refuses to release the full report from her disappearance. To this day, her disappearance remains one of Yosemite's most baffling. A girl walks into the trees and never comes out. No sound, no goodbye, just silence. The forest swallows everything. In September of 1982, 28-year-old Patricia Marie Hicks Dahlstrom left her home in Merced, California. She was headed toward Yosemite. She'd recently left a controversial religious group and may have been looking for peace or reflection. She vanished without a trace. In June 1983, hikers discovered human remains, including a hand and forearm, in Summit Meadow, deep inside Yosemite National Park. 5 years after that, in 1988, a skull was found nearby, jawless and weathered. It wasn't until 2021 that DNA confirmed both remains belonged to Patricia. No cause of death, no official suspect, just a name returned to the bones. The forest had kept her for decades. Yosemite doesn't always give up its dead, and sometimes, when it does, it raises more questions than it answers. July 5th, 1988. Timothy John Barnes, age 25, set out for a solo day hike from Murphy Creek Trailhead near Tensaya Lake. He told his parents that he would return later that afternoon. He never came back. Massive search efforts began. No clothing, no signs of distress, no footprints, no blood, nothing. 2 years later, on July 19th, 1990, Tim was declared legally dead. However, his body was never recovered. The trail that took him never gave him back. One former Yosemite National Park ranger shared this information anonymously. He said the public doesn't know how many are really missing here. He went on to say, "We hear things at night, whispers, movements in places where there are no trails. He also said sometimes the dogs they take out to search for people simply refuse to track. And these are trained bloodhounds that refuse to track. He went on to say, sometimes we find things placed. I'm not sure what he meant by that. Maybe he meant that they find things in places they shouldn't be, like up in trees, but he didn't say for sure. What were his final words? In his anonymous reveal, he said, I don't go into the woods alone anymore, and I never look uphill at night. What in the world did he mean by that? That sounds pretty ominous. So it turns out that the missing 411 profile has some very specific patterns. And we first heard about this from Dave Paulides. And if you haven't read his books, I suggest you do, but be aware, they're pretty terrifying, and you may not want to go back in the woods after you read them. But here are the patterns. No scent trail. Clothing found folded. Dogs refuse to track. Disappearances near granite, water, or caves. And a sudden large weather event after the disappearance. Yosemite has all of these patterns. And those who vanish in Yosemite often vanish without any logical reason or pattern. They just vanish. Yosemite National Park is without a doubt one of the most beautiful places on earth. But sometimes the most beautiful places turn out to be the most dangerous. The cliffs can hide bones. The trees hear things they just can't repeat or wouldn't repeat. And the park's silence is the loudest sound of all. If you go hiking in Yosemite National Park, stay on the path. And if you hear your name called from the woods, don't look back and don't answer. Keep moving. It was September 17th, 2016, and 74-year-old Peter Fancher Jackson texted his son. He told him he was heading out to Yosemite National Park for a weekend getaway. Just Peter, a quiet solo retreat into the wild. Now, Peter Jackson was no amateur. He was in excellent health. He was a seasoned hiker who preferred solitude over sightseeing. Peter arrived at White Wolf Campground and set up at Site 58. Peter had his car packed neatly, everything he needed, and his site was fully paid through September 21st. So he should have been there 5 days. Everything seemed routine. Peter had done this many times. Then, nothing. Not a peep. Peter Jackson never checked out of Site 58. So park rangers came around and found that his vehicle was still packed with everything, untouched. The campsite still looked lived in, except there was no Peter. So he had camped there, but he was just gone. So the rangers thought that he'd gone on a day hike, maybe 5 miles out and back. He'd done this many, many times before, but that evening he didn't come back. So the rangers called search and rescue teams. They came in, they had helicopters, they had people on the ground, experienced searchers. They even had drones in the air, and of course they had their faithful, well-trained search and rescue dogs, probably including a lot of bloodhounds. You know, a bloodhound is quite a creature. It's really amazing. But anyway, they didn't find a single clue about Peter. They didn't find one piece of dropped gear. They didn't find a scent trail. They didn't find any of his boot prints. They didn't find nothing. So it was as if Peter Jackson had just vanished right into one of those granite outcroppings. This search went on for weeks. Then on October 2nd, with storms rolling in, they finally called the search off. It was becoming dangerous for the crews and the animals, so they just called it off. Peter Fancher Jackson was never found. No witnesses, nobody saw him. There was no sign of struggle, no sign of foul play, nothing. Just an empty tent and the kind of silence that really never leaves. You know, some campers avoid Site 15. Others say there's something wrong with the air there. Like the forest knows that someone was taken. It's waiting to take someone else. You know, Yosemite National Park isn't the only place hiding dark, forgotten secrets. We've explored ghost towns where no one dares to spend the night. We've looked at mountain trails that twist time, bend reality, and open portals. We've looked into caves where ancient whispers echo and green ghostly lights dance around. So if you like that sort of thing, like I do, please subscribe to my channel, Paranormal Etc. We have a lot more stories of the strange, the bizarre, and the unexplained coming soon. We're just getting started. So, until the next mystery, thanks for watching.